everybody. This is Dr. Michael Thomas. Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Book, Black Financial Culture, Building Wealth from the Inside Out. I'm your host and author, and I'm incredibly excited about exploring chapter two in the book today. If you have not grabbed a copy, Black Financial Culture, you can pick it up wherever books are sold online. And if you are crypto curious, you can also get a copy from a platform called stuff.io. You don't have to know anything about crypto. You can set up an account within about maybe 2 minutes at most, and you can purchase with a debit or credit card just like you would anywhere else. It's just that you're utilizing blockchain technology in order to do it, and you actually own the digital copy of your book. So I think it's a really, really cool thing. So just to kind of get to the point for today, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was chapter two, which is entitled Less Shame, More Empathy. This chapter was incredibly important to me simply because several years ago, nearly 8 years to date, or thereabouts, I did a TED Talk that was titled Financial Empathy, Understanding the Story Beneath the Numbers. And when I initially presented the idea to do the TED Talk, the conversation was actually going to be about financial shame and not financial empathy. And financial shame was a really, really big topic simply because at that point in time, I was working with a lot of clients that were expressing shame. In fact, there was one individual that I had the opportunity to work with who was considering certain things in terms of dealing with their debt and had gone on a Reddit thread. And on that Reddit thread, it had said some of the most derogatory, hateful, critical things about individuals who was navigating a very similar circumstance as my client. And the frustration there was that individual felt demoralized, despondent, and a deep level of shame. And in navigating that, what really, really crushed me was that for this individual, the circumstances that they were in were not circumstances that would be indicative of a character flaw or not being financially literate. There were just a whole host of things. But that individual, because of the information that they had received online, had cause for them to feel this deep level of shame, so much so that they were almost in a space to where they really just wanted to hide from the situation that they were dealing with. But the pain point of the situation had encouraged them to seek out help, which was, I thought, always a very interesting thing as it relates to it. So when I was going to do the TED Talk, what I wanted to do initially was to talk about how financial shame was this thing that we had just accepted culturally. And I think that for many people, we kind of felt like we can just shame people into behavioral change. Unfortunately, my experiences have shown the complete opposite, is that when we use shame as a tool to nudge individuals to do the right thing financially and otherwise, what happens is that they start hiding what they are doing, not changing what they are doing. And those are two different things. And the thread that I've used in a number of presentations is that shame causes people to hide, while empathy encourages people to rise. And you can't meet someone where they are without embracing all of them. And then also understanding the contextual themes that are causing them to navigate life in such a way to make the types of decisions that they're making. So honestly, we can kind of get to the root cause of a situation to address those concerns. And if we're able to address those concerns, then might we see the type of behavioral change that we hope for with individuals. And again, my frustration was that we were collectively utilizing shame as a tool to encourage certain behaviors, when in effect, people front facing would say all the right things, be incredibly pleasant, but not actually engaging in the real change behind the scenes that we were hoping for. And so what would happen is that we would create this level of duplicity that just would further compound the situation and the circumstance. So in navigating my book, I wanted to be very intentional about speaking to this dynamic of shame and ensuring that the reader understood or understands that in your reading this book, I am not using shame as a way to nudge or to encourage behavior or trying to make you feel bad about things that you've done. Context matters. Context matters. And I'm keenly aware that irrational isn't really a thing. When people say that something's irrational, it's because they're lacking context associated to that circumstance or that situation. And then when we have the context, then we can then be like, oh, well, I can see why this person may have made the choice that they made. Maybe you wouldn't have made it in that way, but we can begin to understand and to unpack and to kind of put ourselves in the shoes of another person, which is this thread of empathy. All right. And so the reason why I did the TED Talk on financial empathy, because empathy in and of itself is not a new idea or concept. The reason why I did it on financial empathy was because I felt as if in this domain and space, many of us in financial services, many of us in society in general, felt as if people know better, they do better. And knowing better and doing better are two separate skill sets. You have to develop a capacity to know and to understand. And then beyond that, then you also have to develop capacity to do or to operationalize said knowledge under the context in which you're navigating the world and navigating life. And oftentimes we just completely do away with context and streamline things as if everybody's navigating the world with perfect information, perfect resources, perfect access, perfect all the different things. So there's no reason someone should be making financial mistakes. That's just not true. And I'm so happy that now we are in a space where this concept or this idea of financial empathy has really taken hold and it's kind of becoming the norm. However, when I did the TED Talk, it was not the norm as it relates to the conversation. And so again, in chapter two, the reason why we're leading with less shame, more empathy, which threads to this notion of self-compassion when it's all said and done, is because through compassion, we can embrace vulnerability. And if we can embrace vulnerability, that means that we can explore the pain points, right, in our life. We can explore these complicated areas in such a way to where we're not leading with self-judgment, self-guilt, self-shame. And guilt and shame are different constructs, and I guess that can be another conversation because there can be a healthy level of guilt, but with guilt, we're not assuming that we are a bad person. It's just that we made a bad decision, and shame assumes that we have a character flaw. And if we dwell in that character flaw and believe in that character flaw and have past memories and circumstances that substantiate that character flaw, we then begin to believe that we are just this person and we're not beyond change. Empathy allows for us to explore those things, not just to look at the situation or circumstance, but to tease out all the other factors and variables that influenced a choice and decision as we're navigating our financial journey. So empathy, I think, is a really key concept when it comes to just navigating our financial journeys, simply because um, whether it's empathy for others, because we don't always know all of the context and all the information as it relates to their situation. And if it's expressing self-empathy or empathy or self-compassion, which is kind of completing the arc of empathy, It's actually allowing for us to engage in our woundedness in a way that we're not triggered emotionally, but we can experience ourselves objectively. So generally speaking, there are three types of empathy. There is cognitive empathy, which is perspective seeking. We can seek perspective of other people, or we can actually engage in self-exploration and seek perspective for circumstances and situations that we navigated. Did I internalize it the correct way? Did I have all the information um, in the way that I viewed something that happened? Do I need to go back and unpack that and explore it? And then from there, we have affective empathy, where it's the emotional side of empathy. And it's understanding the emotions that are associated or tethered to an event that we now understand through perspective seeking. And then we can also engage in this process with self to understand what emotions came from an experience and whether or not those emotions still serve me in the same way that I navigate the world today. And then we have compassionate empathy. And then so compassionate empathy is that it's when someone is moved to take action based on what they understand about a circumstance and how that understanding is also tethered to an emotion. So that if I do act and I respond, I act in a way where it does not cause harm by being insensitive to the emotional state of an individual. And what's also equally important is that we can engage in self-compassion by understanding our emotional state to a circumstance, to understand where the why is, so that we can actually create better goals and strategies to work towards some end, understanding that we still have hurt, we still have woundedness. So if I'm navigating a financial circumstance or journey, that means I might not be able to rush in completely because of understanding and have clarity about my past. Maybe I need to engage in this process a little bit more gently as I establish a firm foundation in which to build, right? So empathy should lead to a compassionate response in the way that I think about it. And so how I describe or how I describe financial empathy is one's capacity to understand, feel, and respond compassionately to the context of someone's financial life, right? So in the chapter two, one of the paragraphs that really resonates with me in this chapter because I wanted to model something, right? I wanted to model how shame can creep up. And if shame creeps up and it causes us to hide, then that means that we're not taking in new information. We're not trying to change. And in some instances, we may not think that we can change. We can think that we're fixed or that we're stuck. And there is a notion of boundedness that can come about. But boundedness can be seasonal, and boundedness isn't something that has to keep us stuck in a rut for the rest of our lives. And we have to question our bounds and whether or not they still exist. Okay. And our brains actually can't tell the difference until we've actually engaged in a process of testing the boundaries to see if they're still there. There's some of us who are still navigating life, me included, who've been bounded by circumstances, and we don't want to jump as high to see if that invisible ceiling is still there to bat us down. And it's not. But because of the hurt and pain and frustration or um, guilt, right, that can come about having navigated certain circumstances in the past can prevent us from moving outside of what is no longer there to hold us back. And this is one of those areas where that's the case. And it says, money for the longest time induced a sense of internal dread that took me back to some of the worst childhood memories. Here I was, a grown man, walking around with deeply seated financial tendencies that reflected where I once was and not who I had become. Unfortunately, we rarely discuss how our direct or indirect experiences with money, however young we might have been, can influence our relationship with our personal finances over a lifetime. Therefore, in order to develop a healthy relationship with money, we must be mindful of our financial past without guilt, shame, or judgment. And if there's nothing else that you take away from reading my book, if you ever get around to doing it, is that your financial journey is never going to be perfect, and that's okay. Sometimes we're going to make mistakes because we didn't have enough information. Sometimes we're going to make financial mistakes because we knew better and we made them anyway. And we're like, so be it, so be it. I'll live with the consequences. You're human. You're human. We're all human. None of us are perfect. And the idea of financial well-being and our capacity to create and generate wealth and to sustain that wealth over a lifetime has nothing to do with perfection. Perfection is not required. What is required is that we allow ourselves to experience the moments when we fall short with grace, with compassion and kindness. We acknowledge and allow ourselves to be accountable in the areas where we've had shortcomings. And then we also empower ourselves to be accountable in the truth that because of what I know now, I can engage in a process if I choose to take a step in a different direction, one step at a time. And that's it. That's it. And if you can tap into the core, if you can tap into the spirit of that, I have no doubt that you'll be able to take everything else from the book, run with it, and do extraordinary things. But it's very important to understand that it won't happen perfectly, and that's okay. And that you don't always have to be hard on yourself to change behavior and of course correct. Sometimes grace, kindness, and compassion are the tools that we need in a season that we're navigating. With that being said, at the end of the day, that's for you to choose. And I would challenge you to actually consider maybe a new way, a new paradigm in a way that you experience self and money and the way that you experience others and money. So I hope that this message was a blessing to you. I look forward to hearing about how you experienced the book. And it warms my heart that you took some time to actually spend this amount of time to watch this video. So you all stay blessed, and until next time, you have more power than you think. Own it. Take care.